All right, welcome. Today we're tackling one of the most critical phases of anesthesia, emergence and extubation. This is the one part that's just packed with risk, but it often doesn't get the same spotlight as induction. For your exams, and more importantly for your patients, getting this right is absolutely non-negotiable. So let's get right into it. So, just how high are the stakes? Well, get this. The landmark Fourth National Audit Project, or NAP4, discovered that nearly a third, one-third, of all major airway complications happen during emergence and in the recovery room. That's a huge number, right? And it really highlights why we have to be on our A game every single time. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll talk about why this phase is such a big deal, the high-stakes handoff. Then we'll dive into anticipating complications, because seeing them coming is half the battle. After that, we'll walk through the essential 4-step safety plan, master the actual techniques, and finally, we'll cover the crucial care that happens after the tube is out. All right, first up, the high-stakes handoff. Let's really get to the bottom of what's happening here. We're talking about taking a patient from a completely controlled, unconscious state back to being awake and breathing on their own. And let me tell you, it's this time of massive physiological change inside the body. Emergence is way more than just the patient opening their eyes. It's this complex dance where the brain starts waking up, their breathing drive returns, and this is the really key part, their protective airway reflexes start to come back online. And it's this kind of unpredictable, staggered return of reflexes that makes everything so risky. And if you want to see just how bad things can get, you just have to look at the numbers. This quote from the NAP4 report is chilling. Half of all anesthesia-related deaths were from aspiration. Think about that. And a huge number of those events happened during this incredibly fragile transition. That's a really sobering thought, and it's exactly what we're working so hard to prevent. Okay, so we know the risks are massive. What's the secret to staying safe? It's all about anticipation. If you can see the trouble coming, you can stop it in its tracks. So let's break down what you really need to be watching out for. So the number one bad guy here is upper airway obstruction. It can pop up from anywhere, and it helps to think about where it's coming from. You've got patient factors, right, like obesity or sleep apnea. Then you've got surgical factors. Maybe the airway is full of blood, or there's swelling after a long neck surgery. And of course, there are anesthetic factors that we are directly responsible for. Now, here's one of the complications that honestly, it keeps anesthetists up at night: laryngospasm. It's this incredibly powerful, super primitive reflex where the vocal cords just slam shut. A little bit of saliva is all it takes to trigger it, and your response has to be immediate. Larson's maneuver, 100% oxygen with positive pressure, and maybe deepening the anesthetic. And what happens if you get a really bad obstruction, like from laryngospasm? Well, you can get this POPO, or post-obstructive pulmonary edema. It's life-threatening. Just picture it. The patient is fighting to breathe against a completely shut airway. That huge negative pressure they're generating literally sucks fluid out of their blood vessels and into their lungs. And that classic sign you're looking for, the one they love to ask about in exams, pink, frothy sputum. But there's another cause of obstruction, and this one is super sneaky: residual neuromuscular blockade. The patient might look okay. They might even be taking what look like decent breaths, but those tiny muscles in the throat that keep the airway open, they're the last ones to wake up after paralysis. And this leads to this quiet, slowly developing obstruction that can catch you off guard. So what's the bottom line here? You have absolutely got to, ensure full reversal of that muscle relaxant. The modern guidelines are crystal clear on this: a train-of-4 ratio of at least 0.9, and it has to be confirmed with a quantitative monitor, not just by you looking at the thumb twitch. That's the absolute minimum standard before you even think about touching that tube. Okay, so with all these potential disasters lurking, how do we keep our patients safe? Well, the good news is we have a plan, an evidence-based framework from the Difficult Airway Society that is pure gold for your exams and your daily practice. And this right here, this is it. This should be burned into your brain for every single extubation. It's a really simple 4-part loop: plan, prepare, perform, and post-extubation care. You should be thinking about the plan before the surgery even starts. It's a constant cycle of safety. Now, out of all those steps, the most critical part of prepare is this one decision you have to make. You look at your patient and you decide, are they low risk, meaning we can follow a standard plan? Or are they at risk, meaning reintubation could be a nightmare? Answering that one question literally changes your entire plan from that point forward.
So how do you make that call? Well, you're looking for red flags. I mean, a known difficult airway, that's a no-brainer. But you've got to ask yourself, has the airway changed during the surgery? Is there new swelling? Do I have less access now because of a collar? Is my patient obese with sleep apnea? Any of these things should be screaming at risk at you.
All right, so you've got your plan, you've decided if your patient is at risk or not. Now it's go time. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of the actual techniques, starting with the everyday standard and then touching on the advanced stuff for those really tough cases. Okay, this is your bread and butter, the standard awake extubation. You need to know these steps cold for your exams. First, pre-oxygenate with 100% oxygen to build up that safety buffer. Suction out their mouth really well. Make sure they're breathing regularly on their own, and then you wait until they are fully awake, following your commands. Then, and only then, do you give a little positive pressure, deflate the cuff, and pull the tube. And you always keep them on oxygen afterwards. Now, you've probably heard people talk about deep extubation, right? It's really important you understand the pros and cons here. An awake extubation is the standard for a reason. The patient has their protective reflexes back. They can cough. They can protect their airway. A deep extubation might be smoother for their blood pressure, but, and this is a huge but, you're doing it with zero protective airway reflexes. They're gone. This is not a beginner's move, and it's definitely not for your at-risk patient. So what about those at-risk patients? Well, you've got a few more tricks up your sleeve. You can do a laryngeal mask exchange. You can use a remifentanil infusion to keep them from coughing their guts out. You can use an airway exchange catheter. It's basically a little guide wire you leave in the airway so you can get a tube back in fast if things go south. But remember this, sometimes the smartest, safest move you can make is to not extubate at all. Okay, so the tube's out. High fives all around, right? Well, not so fast. Our job is far from done. That trip to the recovery room, the PACU, and the first hour or so they spend there, this period is just as critical for safety. Remember that NAP4 data we talked about? A ton of those complications happen right here in recovery. That means you need to transfer them safely with full monitoring. You need to give a rock-solid, structured handover to the recovery nurse, flagging any worries you have. And you absolutely have to have a plan for what if? What if things go wrong? Look, if there is one single thing I want you to burn into your memory from all this, it's this. Extubation is an elective procedure. Unlike an emergency, you are in the driver's seat. You control the timing. If the patient isn't ready, if you don't have the right equipment, if you're feeling rushed, you just wait. Patience, my friends, is your most powerful safety device. So, we've walked through the guidelines, the drugs, the techniques, but I want to leave you with a question to chew on. Beyond all the technical stuff, what's the single most important human factor that prevents a disaster? Is it just being vigilant? Is it communication? Teamwork? The truth is, it's probably a mix of all of them, isn't it? Something to think about.
Everything we've covered today is pulled from these fantastic review articles. They are absolutely perfect reads for your exam prep. Thanks so much for tuning in.